I'm gathering up all the beads in the house because it's time for the Big Bot Bash. Bill, well known for making stuff, posted this Junkbot generator in conjunction with the release of his game Bangarang in the Gutterlands, which I downloaded for free from thegutterlands.com, but he also sells physical copies. He might have mentioned that once or twice. You roll a 20-sided die for each attribute, and with this list of random words, you build a Junkbot. You can build at any scale. It doesn't even really have to be for the game, which is good for me because I don't have, I think in the UK they call them mates to play a game with. I thought I needed a few more beads, so I snagged some holiday decorations and garland on clearance. Yes, I've been doing this since Christmas. And even bought a toolbox so I don't misplace them as I free the wood beads from their twine garland prison. The only real restriction is no 3D prints. He wrote it real big there on the sheet so you could see it. I don't have a 3D printer, but I've had to stop myself from buying one multiple times. I think it could really level up my builds. So my new / first ever goal for the channel is to get just big enough that a 3D printing company sends me a 3D printer to honestly review. I'm just putting it out there in the universe. I'd love to try out your products on the channel. 3D printers, laser cutters, obviously miniatures, paints, ninja stars. What was I talking about? Right, Bill's Big Bot Bash. Nailed it. I've also got a few containers of printer parts, spray caps, and other random bits to rummage through as well. I don't have the same sort of stuff that Bill uses, so my bots are probably going to be a smidge larger. These are the attributes I rolled for this Junkbot. The clear part of this Tic Tac container caught my eye for the brig shithouse body. Reminded me of myself. My high school science teacher actually used to refer to me as a rotund gentleman. I kind of like that. I miss that guy. The other half of this container looks a bit like tidy whities. I think the Brits call them bloomers. A bot with underwear is funny to me, and it gets rid of this extra piece of plastic, so let's use it. I need a wide head to fit 9 eyes. I think my math is right on that. So maybe this lotion bottle part will do. These toy pipes are slender enough for legs to look like they could dash, I think, with some beads used for the joint area. I'm trying out some new wood carving bits on plastic because they didn't show up in the mail in time for me to carve a wooden nutcracker before Christmas, even though I ordered them mid-November. Maybe next winter. This old pipe cutter has to be used with a very light touch, otherwise, instead of cutting the pipe, it crushes it. The legs are too long to fit on the base I chose to use, but I don't decide to shorten them until later. Let's try gluing 9 googly eyes to that lotion bottle head. 3x3. They won't be googly once it's all painted. I'd hate for this bot with metal underwear to have goofy looking eyes. Not my favorite look for a head, but that's what I rolled. Now to sand off the lettering on the undies. I do quite a bit of tinkering to glue the legs into place. Just super glue and baking soda. I get pretty frustrated because I end up covering my fingers in super glue, but I do get the legs posed and also remove the extra bit of, I guess what would be waistband. Now to glue the 2 torso sections together. I switched to gel super glue to reduce the amount of glue on my fingers, but then switched back to liquid super glue for seemingly no reason. Then I used some super glue accelerator, which I transferred to an applicator bottle because I got tired of unscrewing the spray cap on the accelerator bottle and tapping the glued part with the spray tube. And knocking over an applicator bottle doesn't spill dollars worth of accelerator over your work area. So there's a bit of a hobby tip for you. I trimmed the lotion bottle head down a bit. Thought it would look better. It didn't. Now to fasten it to the body. I added a block of styrofoam so the body wouldn't be so squishy, and cut a hole for the neck. I feel like I'm talking a lot and I'm nowhere near done with this Junkbot. I'm not done with the legs quite yet. I made some tiny feet from an old Sharpie I cut in half. And to get those to fit, I cut a curve into the leg pipes with the carving burr in my rotary tool. At this point, I switched to hot glue. It's equally as frustrating as super glue, but I'm making a box out of medium weight chipboard, the kind you find at the back of a legal pad. And I thought hot glue would be better for this application and didn't really switch back to super glue moving forward. I didn't make any measurements for the box, which will be one of the Junkbot shoulders. In my sketch, I did a terrible sketch. I wanted one shoulder to look a bit like a jerry can to fuel the scorcher hands. Glue a bead to it. Hollow out the bead. fit another bead into that bead to work as an elbow joint, cut a hole in the side of the shoulder to fit a bead, and cut a hole in the side of the body to fit the other side of that same bead. I always struggle with how much of what I'm doing needs to be narrated. I mean, you can see what I'm doing. I don't need to tell you. I know you're not dumb. I'll actually get a comment on a video from time to time proving that I am in fact the dumb one in this exchange. I set aside that flamethrower I glued together to start working on the arm. The flavor with a U that I rolled is asymmetrical, so I glued a big round bead for this shoulder. I used an entire hot glue stick and the bead holds in place right away. Yep. I constructed this arm to be waving and the hand to be on fire. I figured one scorcher hand could be a flamethrower, and to be asymmetrical, the other scorcher hand could be an actual flaming hand. That's the plan anyway. It'll probably end up just looking like a ball of fire when I paint it. The back was completely bare, so I glued a pipe to it. And since the top of the body was also bare, I glued some pipes to that, asymmetrically. I made a bunch of rivets out of cereal box cardboard with a hole punch, and with a bit of super glue, it's just a matter of gently moving the rivets into place. One at a time. Maybe just that first one. Bill makes it look so easy with his fancy stop motion cuts. Maybe I rivet it later, or maybe not at all. And since this video wasn't long enough, and it's currently -8 degrees Fahrenheit outside, making priming the Junkbot not an option, let's build a second one. I think Bill put the Is That Meat flavor with a U on the list to urge you to build the meaty ones variety of bots from his game, but I don't really want to break out the clay and sculpt, so since the body is a heavy smoker, this is going to be a grill bot. A bot that grills meat. To build that grill, I've got this candy container that I'll need to shorten. Nice. Then cut out a rectangular hatch that can be glued over top of the grill as a hood later. I made a long neck out of some 16 gauge wire and beads with a button on the end and hot glued it into place. Then a round bead is glued onto the button for a head. The neck is very wobbly. I think the British say wibbly wobbly, so I used a ton of hot glue to make sure it stays in place. Then I glue the grill hood on. A bit of knitting mesh or granny grating is used for the grill grating. Makes sense. I cut a plastic tube into sections to make triple jointed arms. These kind of remind me of the long arm tribe from One Piece, like Scratch Man Apu. Hate that guy. They also kind of remind me of the jump ropes we used to have in grade school that we never actually used as ropes and just whipped the hell out of each other with. Just me, or? Okay. I made myself miserable off camera constructing these gun hands, which are just regular hands, but the index fingers are gun barrels. I wanted to build a revolver into the hand, but getting to this point was difficult enough. The fingers are made from plastic hooks I stole from a store display headed for the garbage. Gluing everything to place is time consuming and annoying for me, and boring, I assume, for you, so let's just skip past that part, okay? I made a spatula out of one of those plastic hooks as well. I'm going to clean up all the excess hot glue everywhere with a knife once it's cooled. Off camera, I glued some eyes onto the head and gave it a button nose. Hopefully that's cute enough to still be round and cute. The legs are spray bottle caps with a bead for the knee joint. I did an admirable yet lousy job of curving the cap where the leg meets the body, and then just used a ton of hot glue to fill any gaps that remained. I filled the leg caps with hot glue so it wouldn't be so top heavy. Hopefully these are bulky enough to look like they didn't skip leg day. I also glued on a shoulder pad of sorts to hold both ketchup and mustard bottles. For the meat, of course. I think this bot is pretty much built, but it's still below zero outside, so let's build a third. The legs need to have wheels, which I have none, so I got a cheap mini monster truck, if you consider $3 cheap. None of the $1 Hot Wheels had decent tread on the wheels, so I was trying to feel the monster truck wheels through the packaging in the store and just sort of guessed that the wheels were plastic. Glad I guessed correctly on that one. I wasn't really sure how to build this one, so I just started putting random stuff together on the table, then just sort of sat there looking at it for a while. I couldn't pull a wheel off the axle, so I ended up snapping the axle in half, and will use a bead to put the wheels back together. I also used the wood carving burrs again to make some rudimentary fender wheel wells on a wooden bead, and will use a length of wood dowel for the beanpole body. Since the flavor with a U for this Junkbot is unlucky, it's going to have a flat tire, so I use a heat gun to melt the plastic wheel, and then press one side of the wheel onto the table to make it look flat. On the finished piece you don't really notice it, but it is there. Then it's time to start gluing stuff together as planned. I was still kind of puzzled on how to make knuckle dragger arms, and I was impatient hitting the record button on my phone and stopped recording as soon as it started and lost footage of this stage of the build, but it's pretty straightforward. I decided that knuckle dragger arms would be big and bulky and reach all the way to the bottom of the wheels for the knuckles to be dragged along the ground. I also glued on a head that kind of looks like it has a neck brace, adding to that unlucky flavor. He looks like he'd be wheeling around, just yelling for his best friend. Adam! This other arm needs the hand to be gesturing up yours, because that's what I rolled. The fingers are wood beads glued onto a piece of wooden skewer. I probably should have curved the non-gesturing finger, but here we are. I also may need to rotate the arm a bit so that the gesture is pointed in the right direction. I glued a half bead for the left eye and made an eye patch out of EVA foam for the right eye because he's unlucky and so it doesn't look right. See what I did there? Alright, that's pretty much it for the build. All the Junkbots got glued to wooden coaster bases. These are a bit bigger than Bill's poker chips. I lost all mine anyways, in a card game. Go fish. I don't want to talk about it. I glued some chipboard onto the Grillbot's base so that it would stand higher and so the spatula wouldn't be resting on the ground. You can't have dirt mixing with the meat. I added some EVA foam and just a few rivets to the first Junkbot and glued 2 pieces of melted styrofoam to the base to weigh it down better. After painting the Junkbots, I'll add some of my own crustard, if you will, to the bases. And this last guy I thought could be broken down on the side of the road, so I glued some sandpaper to a cut off piece of chipboard and glued it onto the base. And I've waited long enough that it is now almost 50 degrees Fahrenheit outside, so I can safely prime these guys a dark brown. I always think it's weird that no matter where you live, people say, oh, if you don't like the weather here, just wait a few days and it'll change. That's Wisconsin weather for you. Literally any state in the union they say that. I'm sure you hear it in other countries too. It's like drastic weather changes aren't specific to any one small region. But you just gotta mention the weather, no matter what, so I thought I'd try using a bit of sponge to paint a little bit faster, but I can't freaking see what I'm doing with this lighting. That's better. And painting with a sponge isn't that much faster. It also doesn't help that I can only use a tiny bit of sponge and have massive hands, so I just switched to a brush. Bill, you know, from Bill Making Stuff, always says that painting time is boring time and boring time is story time, but I'm just kind of gonna skip over the painting process real quick because I think I forgot how to paint for a second there. And I'll do a very small bit of story time at the end. The brown wash I made was too light and only really showed up on the beige arm sections of the Grillbot, so I did the vast majority of the painting off screen. And it might be fun to not give you a reason to click away until seeing the final reveal at the end. I will say that I painted the third bot to look kind of like Frankie. It's my second One Piece reference this video. I mixed up some texture paste, kind of like how Bill does, with some construction sand, baking soda. I used some brown craft paint and some old gross black paint, and my favorite, Titebond wood glue. It's not quite crustard, maybe call it crud pudding. I didn't add enough sand to the mix, so I sprinkle it over the wet crud pudding to get some better texture on the bases. Once dry, the bases get a light gray, then white dry brush. As for the meat for the Grillbot, no, I did not forget. I actually have a failed experiment of styrofoam I melted in acetone and then mixed in red alcohol ink. I was hoping for a more fire truck red color, but got cursed meat instead. But it works perfectly for this, so I used some cutting pliers to make some gross patties to throw on the grill. And with that, we're done. I didn't really like the first Junkbot until I finished painting it. The underwear reminds me of SpongeBob. I think in the UK they call him Sir Robert the Sponge or something. I don't know, I didn't have Nickelodeon growing up. I'm getting a little bit better at object source lighting, and it made the burning hand the focal point on this. Kind of makes me want to listen to Astro Zombies by the Misfits. The 9 eyes weren't so bad after all. Not quite 20 eyes, but they're all the same. I think I'm getting better at painting lens effects as well. The more you practice, the better you are, I guess. That's what they tell you. Then we got Blueberry Fingers over here. Nothing seems to be going its way lately. Lost an eye in the last battle, so it needed to have an eye patch welded on to keep critters from building a nest inside its head. And on the way to the next Bangarang, it takes the only paved road in existence in an effort to save time, only to pick up a piece of scrap metal in the left tire. Maybe its luck would turn around if it was just a bit nicer to others. The Grillbot ended up being my favorite for just how weird it is. The long neck is very creaky, but it is necessary so that the head can get pretty much inside the grill to make sure the burgers don't get overcooked. Only medium rare for the boys. The gun hands were installed later after one too many pie on the windowsill moments, so now it can defend the food from bandits. Meat bandits. Much like my senior prom after party, I showed up uninvited to the YouTube part of the Big Bot Bash, but instead of watching 2005's House of Wax, then getting bored and leaving, I built 3 Junkbots that I hope you enjoyed. A lot of high school references today. Feeling old, I guess. If you happen to check this out in connection to build making stuff, I do weird builds and kit bash type stuff here, usually monster related. Consider subscribing so I can get closer to having those 3D printers and ninja stars sent my way. A bit more rambly, maybe a little bit sassier than usual in the video, but hopefully you liked it. And if you did, Blue Thunderbomb the like button off the top of a ladder. And the temperature's below freezing again. That's just Wisconsin weather for you. Yep, I know.